There is a land at the edge of the world where the earth bakes red under a merciless sun, where thorned acacia trees stand like ancient sentinels, and where the wind carries not rain, but stories. This is Somalia, the Horn of Africa, a place of ancient peoples, fierce pride, and a stubbornness in the face of conquest that has broken the teeth of every empire that has ever tried to swallow it. In the year 1899, a storm, unlike any the British Empire had ever faced, began to gather in this red, arid land. It had no cannons, no warships, no cavalry regiments. It had one man, and his name was Sayyid Mohammed Abdullah Hassan. The British, in their arrogance, called him the Mad Mullah. But for 20 years, this so-called madman made the most powerful empire in the history of the world spend millions of pounds, lose hundreds of men, and ultimately drop bombs from the sky, all just to silence one man's voice. This is his story. If you love untold African history, subscribe right now and hit the bell. We drop a new story every week that your history teacher never told you about. To understand what Hassan became, you must first understand the world he was born into. The year is 1856. The place is the Samadik Valley in the Hod, a vast plateau of dry golden grassland in northern Somalia, where nomadic Somali clans have lived for centuries, following their camels across the earth in an ancient rhythm that no foreign power had yet disturbed. Somalia in the 19th century was not one unified nation. It was a mosaic of proud, fiercely independent clans, the Darod, the Isaac, the Dir, the Hawiya, each governed not by kings in palaces, but by tradition, by elders, by the spoken word of men who had earned their authority over generations. They needed no walls to know who they were. They were bound by language, by Islam, and by the identity of a nomadic people whose freedom was written into the very way they moved across the earth. But the world was changing. In the great capitals of Europe, London, Rome, Paris, men in tailored suits were drawing lines across a continent they had never walked. The scramble for Africa had begun. By 1884, Britain had established its protectorate over northern Somalia. The Italians took the south. The French seized the port of Djibouti, and the Ethiopian Emperor Menelik, sensing the European hunger for land, pushed his own borders deep into the Somali Ogaden. The Somali people found themselves encircled by foreigners, by colonizers, by men who did not speak their language, did not share their faith, and did not ask their permission. Into this world of creeping occupation, a boy was growing up who would one day make all of them answer for it. Mohammed Abdullah Hassan was a child of unusual fire. From his earliest years, he showed a ferocious appetite for learning, for the Quran, for Islamic law, for the intricacies of Sufi philosophy. By the time he reached manhood, he had memorized the entire Quran, earning him the honorific Hafiz, a title given only to those who carry the whole of God's word inside them, word for word, breath for breath. He was tall, lean, and angular, high cheekbones, sharp jaw, dark eyes that seemed to hold both fire and calculation at once. When he walked into a gathering, men fell silent, not out of fear alone, but out of the kind of magnetic gravity that radiates from a person who knows exactly what they are here to do. He wore the simple white garments of a Sufi scholar and carried himself with the bearing of a king. In 1894, at the age of 38, Hassan made the Hajj pilgrimage to Mecca. In the holy city, he encountered Sheikh Mohammed Salih, the founder of the Salihiyya, a militant and reformist Sufi order that preached strict Islamic practice and fierce resistance to foreign domination. Hassan sat at his feet and absorbed everything. he returned to Somalia dressed in the plain white sash of the Salihia, spiritually transformed, politically awakened, and burning with a purpose that would consume the next 26 years of his life. Back in Berbera, the coastal city under British control, he built a mosque and began to preach. What he saw around him enraged him to his bones. British administrators treating Somalis as colonial subjects, Christian missionaries converting Somali children, pulling them from their families and their faith, giving them new names in a foreign tongue. And worst of all, Somali chiefs, some of them, bowing to the foreigners, collaborating, trading the sovereignty of their people for the comfort of the colonizers' approval. Hassan was not a man built for bowing. He spoke, he thundered, he used the ancient Somali art of oral poetry, a tradition where verse was the newspaper, the war cry, and the history book all at once, to preach resistance to anyone who would listen. The British noticed, and they were not pleased. In 1899, the spark that lit everything came. A Somali child was taken by French Catholic missionaries in Berbera and baptized into Christianity. For Hassan, this was not merely an injustice. It was a declaration of war against everything he held sacred, against the faith of his people, against the future of his nation. He declared jihad. It was not a desperate act. It was made with the cold, burning clarity of a man who had been preparing for this moment his entire life. He gathered around him the dervishes, followers of the Salihia order, Somali men from across the clans, hardened nomads who knew how to fight, how to vanish into the landscape, how to survive on nothing in a terrain that would have killed any British soldier within a week. His first attack on British forces at Qadariya caught them completely unprepared. The Somali soldiers serving in the British ranks fled in terror. Hassan's dervishes, poorly armed but ferociously motivated, struck and dissolved back into the desert like smoke before the British could respond. Word spread across the land like fire across dry grass. A man had stood up, a man had fought back, and he had not been destroyed. In a land where the British seemed untouchable, this was not just a military victory, it was proof. And Somalis from every clan began to listen. You're watching one of Africa's greatest untold stories. If this is hitting different, smash that like button right now. It helps more people find this history. And drop a comment below. Had you heard of the Mad Mullah before today? The British did not take the Dervish uprising lightly. Between 1900 and 1904, they launched 4 major military expeditions against Hassan. Massive, expensive, heavily armed operations designed to crush the rebellion once and for all. Every single one failed. The reason was Hassan himself. He never fought a battle he could not win. When the British advanced in force, he vanished, retreating deep into the Somali interior, into endless rolling plains and dry riverbeds that he knew like the back of his own hand. When the British overextended, exhausted and desperate for water under the punishing equatorial sun, he struck. Fast, precise, and devastating. The 1903 to 1904 expeditions alone cost Britain over £5 million sterling. The British press back in London began to ask uncomfortable questions. What exactly was the empire getting for its money in this dusty corner of Africa? By 1905, unable to land a decisive blow, Britain negotiated the Treaty of Illig. Hassan was given territory in the Italian protectorate to govern. What happened next astonished the Europeans who had spent years calling him a madman. He built a functioning state. The dervishes minted their own coins. They maintained courts of law. They built stone forts. They conducted formal diplomatic correspondence with foreign powers. Hassan was not a warlord operating in chaos. He was a head of state, ruling a people who had chosen him freely. In 1909, the British withdrew their forces from the Somali interior, retreating to the coast. It was a decision born of cost, but withdrawal was not victory. Hassan knew it. He resumed his campaign. Then came the day that would pass into legend. August the 9th, 1913. A Dervish force intercepted the Somaliland Camel Constabulary, an elite British-commanded unit of 110 men, led by Colonel Richard Caulfield, one of Britain's most experienced officers in the region. When the dust of battle settled at Dul Madoba, 57 of those 110 men were dead or wounded. Colonel Caulfield himself lay among the fallen. Hassan did what no general before him had done with a battlefield victory. He wrote a poem about it. The death of Richard Caulfield was composed and sent, carried by dervish messengers across the entire land, recited in mosques and markets from the coast to the deep interior. It described the battle in vivid, unsparing verse. It mocked the British for sending their men to die on Somali soil. It declared with icy, measured pride that God had stood with the dervishes on that field and that the field itself had judged. It was psychological warfare at its most brilliant. Hassan understood something that no military textbook had yet written, that the story of a battle can be more powerful than the battle itself. He was not only fighting the British with spears and rifles, he was fighting them with words, and on that battlefield he was undefeated. By the time of Dul Madoba, Hassan had built something the world had not expected. His capital at Taleh rose from the flat floor of the Nugal Valley, 3 massive garrison forts of hand-cut stone, a palace, markets, houses, and courts. The Ottoman Empire, locked in its own war against Britain, recognized him in 1917 as the emir of the Somali people. The German Empire acknowledged him as an ally. He had united clans that had fought each other for generations under a single banner. The banner of Islam, the banner of resistance, the banner of a man whose absolute refusal to yield had made them believe that what seemed impossible was only waiting for the right moment. For over 2 decades, Sayyid Mohammed Abdullah Hassan defied the might of the British Empire and held it at arm's length across the burning Somali earth. He did it without modern supply lines, without foreign armies, without the resources of a nation-state behind him. He did it with faith, with fury, with strategy, and with the loyalty of men who believed in him completely. But 1920 was a different world. The Great War was over. Britain had survived 4 years of industrial slaughter in the trenches of Europe, and it emerged with a new weapon that no desert guerrilla could prepare for: the Royal Air Force. London decided it was time, finally, to end the problem of the Mad Mullah. In January of 1920, a combined force of RAF bombers, ground troops and camel corps converged on the Dervish strongholds. What happened next had never happened before in the entire history of Africa. British biplanes screamed out of the clear Somali sky over Taleh, Jildali and the other Dervish forts, dropping bombs on stone walls that had withstood every ground assault for years. The forts burned. The infrastructure of 2 decades was shattered from above. Camels scattered across the plain. Men ran from the gates. For the first time in his life, Hassan faced a weapon he could not outmaneuver. You cannot use guerrilla tactics against an aeroplane. You cannot vanish into the desert when death falls from the sky. He fled south into the Ogaden, still fighting, still reciting poetry, still refusing to speak the word surrender. December the 21st, 1920. In a small settlement near Imi, in the Ogaden region of Ethiopia, a man lay dying. He was 64 years old. 21 years of war had not killed him. British bullets, British bombs, British gold spent on informers, none of it had finished him. What finished him was influenza, a fever. Something small and invisible, in the end, did what the British Empire never could. His loyal followers buried him in secret, at a location known only to a handful of men, most of whom took it to their own graves. The British searched for the tomb. They feared that even in death, Hassan would become a shrine of resistance, a martyr's grave that would ignite everything they had worked so hard to put out. They were right to fear it. They never found it. To this day, the exact location of the grave of Sayyid Mohammed Abdullah Hassan is unknown. He disappeared into the land he had fought for, becoming part of the very soil the British had never been able to truly claim. History named him a madman. History was wrong. Today, a bronze statue of Sayyid Mohammed Abdullah Hassan stands in the heart of Mogadishu, a tall, fierce figure on horseback, one arm raised, his eyes fixed on the horizon. His poems are still recited in Somali schools. His forts at Taleh still stand in the desert, cracked, weathered, and absolutely refusing to crumble. He is called the father of Somali nationalism, and he earned that title not in a palace, not at a negotiating table, but in the red dust of the Somali earth, with nothing behind him but faith and an iron refusal to accept that any man born free should ever live on his knees. He never had a nation to call his own. He never lived to see his people free. But he asked a question that every generation of Somalis after him inherited. What does it mean to be free? And what is a person willing to pay for it? He was a scholar, a poet, a general, a statesman, and for 20 years he made the most powerful empire the world had ever seen chase shadows across the burning Somali earth and never catch them. The British called him mad, but the madman lasted 20 years. And the empire that hunted him is gone. This was Sayyid Mohammed Abdullah Hassan, the man they called the Mad Mullah of Somalia. If this story moved you the way it moved us making it, please share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more untold African history every single week, and leave us a comment. Which African story do you want us to tell next? We read every single one. Thank you for watching.